Hey there, night owls and mystery lovers. Welcome to Horror Stories and Rain. Tonight, we're diving into 5 unforgettable encounters with the Ouija board that blur the lines between reality and the supernatural. Before we jump in, we could use a little help. If you're enjoying our stories, please hit the like button. It really helps our small channel grow. Subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Every subscription means a lot to us and helps build our little community. We want to hear from you. What's an animal that you think brings bad luck? Drop your answers in the comments below. It helps us create better stories and lets us know what you find spooky or interesting. Whether you're here to chill with some spine-tingling tales or to relax with our 6 hours of soothing ambient sounds, think gentle rain, calming melodies, and the soft whisper of the night. There's something for everyone to unwind and engage with. Now get comfortable, maybe grab a blanket, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. Whether you're here to relax or to get your adrenaline pumping, we've got you covered. Remember, every story has 2 sides, one that seeks to entertain and one that invites you to reflect. So let's get started with our first haunting tale. Whispers from the Abyss, Part 1. The basement always felt a bit surreal, like stepping into a time capsule that had preserved our teenage years in sepia-toned nostalgia. We'd spent countless nights here, our laughter reverberating off the cold concrete walls, mingling with the ghost stories that never seemed quite real. That evening, though, the air was laced with a subtle chill, a whisper of something waiting. I found the Ouija board buried beneath a pile of old comic books and dust-covered video game cartridges. It seemed almost absurdly out of place, this relic of curious foolishness amongst the remnants of our youth. I tossed it onto the table, laughing at the startled reactions from Felicity and Dev. The wood clattered noisily, the sound unnaturally sharp against the quiet hum of distant traffic from outside. "Do you believe in this stuff?" I asked, masking any hint of doubt behind a veneer of skepticism. Part of me craved the thrill of challenge against the unknown, that strange, intoxicating mix of fear and disbelief. "Why not?" Felicity replied with a teasing lilt. Her eyes glittered with an unnerving mix of curiosity and belief. "It's just a bit of fun, right, Dev?" Dev grinned, his easy charm filling the room as effortlessly as always. "Yeah, until someone gets scared and flips all the lights on." The humor faded into a contemplative silence as the planchette was set into motion. My fingers brushed faintly against it, joined by Felicity's delicate touch and Dev's steady warmth. As the moments ticked by, the room seemed to draw a collective breath, anticipation pooling like a thick fog. "We should start," Felicity suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "What could go wrong?" It started simply, innocuous questions punctuated by laughter or incredulous looks, each of us suspecting the other of being the puppet master behind the whimsical movements. But then something shifted. The temperature dropped with an almost palpable presence, and the laughter ceased as the planchette moved with intent, the board whispering its ancient secrets. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice tight with unexpected trepidation. The planchette glided across the letters. The board spelled out Eloise. A presence lingered, pushing a burble of unease through my mind. Felicity leaned closer, eyebrows knitting with a combination of intrigue and fear. "Are you trapped here?" she continued, breathless. The board answered immediately, as if waiting. "Bound." The word hung in the air like an uninvited specter, its weight pressing against us, demanding to be noticed. An electric silence settled in the room, disbelief gnawing at my insides like a slow-burning fuse. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as we pressed on, probing with our questions, a patchwork of skepticism and belief sown among us. The cold took on a sharper edge, and I fought the slope of creeping dread lodged firmly in the pit of my stomach. Could something dark truly linger here, in our haven of laughter and childhood? "How do we help you?" Dev asked, his voice steady, but underlined with urgency. The board responded with uncanny speed, the planchette darting towards a phrase that left us with fervent eyes and furrowed brows. "Release me." In that moment, Eloise's presence seemed to cement itself into our reality, no longer simply a game but a plea that demanded action. Awestruck and unnerved, Our small circle began to grasp the magnitude of our encounter with the unknown, as the weight of her words reverberated in the chilling void around us. Would we be her saviors, or had we opened a door that should have remained closed? In that lingering silence, a pact of its own began to form, an understanding unspoken but deeply shared. Whispers from the Abyss, Part 2. Leaving the basement behind that night, I tried dismissing the strange session as a figment of our collective imagination. Fell's flights of fancy, Dev's theatrical humor. Yet deep down, an itch of unease lodged itself in the back of my mind. The shadows in my house seemed to stir uniquely, under the moon's pallor, stretching longer, curling against the corners with a disconcerting familiarity. I awoke in the dappled night to a cacophony of wind and whisperings. My heartbeat echoed the chill creeping around the edges of my consciousness. A frame on the mantel toppled with a muted clatter. My skeptical mind chalked it up to a breeze until the whispers fragmented into coherent syllables. My skin prickled with the realization that they were not random, but eerily intentional. The board had intoned "outside." I froze, eyes instinctively darting to the curtained window overlooking the empty street, an involuntary shiver snaking up my spine. A dark silhouette veiled the moonshine briefly, a trick of the mind perhaps, but the fear was real, nearly tangible. The subsequent day offered no reprieve. At a cafe clutching my lukewarm coffee, I scanned the crowd. Felicity, face shadowed by concern, and Dev, subdued, arrived one after the other, carrying their own burdens of sleepless night terrors and half-whispered misgivings. "We can't ignore this," Felicity stated simply, her gaze flickering between the two of us, as if drawing strength from our shared bewilderment. Her insistence bore an unsettling conviction that rekindled the previous night's dread. Dev nodded, absent his usual jocularity. "It was just a game, man, but now it doesn't feel like one anymore." The cafe felt stuffy, the air saturated with unspoken fears. What started as nostalgia had spiraled into an ever-consuming presence, an unseen hand guiding us toward a confronting inevitability. Eloise's truth and the forgotten tie binding us to it. We all agreed, or rather surrendered to the collective impulse, to reconvene in the basement. We needed to understand, to piece together the fragmented whisperings of our improbable communion. Back among the old boxes and flickering light, a sense of foreboding settled heavily. The air felt thick, charged with anticipation, as if Eloise herself drifted among us, observing, voiceless but potent. Against the creased Ouija board, scarred by years of teenage exploration, we pried open our shared memories, dredging past events we long deemed unworthy of remembrance. The atmosphere turned palpable with significance as we played back old echoes from those basement floors, filled with chaos and impulsive oaths, the details fogged by adolescent bravado. "What's the connection, then?" I pondered aloud, tracing a finger over the wooden surface. Felicity shuffled through her childhood stories, her expression a tapestry of nostalgia and resolve, while Dev remained fixed in concentration. We regrouped around the Ouija board one last time that night, fingers skimming its edge, tentative yet tinged with determination. "How can we make it right?" Felicity posed, her voice as determined as a vow echoing through the spectral void. Appropriately as before, the board spelled out a chilling directive: remember. The room's shadows shifted once more, and the recollection appeared on the horizon of my mind, an old dare. Foolish and fraught with implications we hadn't understood. Revelations settled into place, forming an inescapable gravity pulling us closer to our haunted past. Eloise's entrapment, and perhaps our own deliverance, rested on this imperfect memory looming over our newfound resolution. Whispers from the Abyss, Part 3. Felicity's revelation of that long-buried dare echoed with haunting clarity. The night we promised Eloise something we never thought we'd have to deliver. A pact made in jest, woven with bravado and the veil of naivety. We'd forgotten, but Eloise hadn't. She remained bound by our words, expecting redemption only we could deliver. Determined, we assembled once more around the battered board. The room's dim light writhed like a living thing, joined with whispers of an unseen presence. Shivers clambered up my spine as my fingers settled on the planchette, emotions taut and whispered arguments silent. "What must we do to set you free?" My voice dripped with quiet strength, carried by the tension and collective longing for an end. The planchette moved deliberately, spelling out the promise. A hush fell over us, intertwined with the cacophony of wind pelting the windows and shadows clinging tightly to corners. It was our last chance to amend what was done. Memories surged forward unbidden, the playful chance of youth, the heady intoxication of toying with the unseen, not comprehended but terribly binding. Resolute, Felicity intoned a harmony of soothing syllables, ignoring her trembling voice that sought to honor our mistake with earnest intent. Dev, usually so light-hearted, offered supporting words, a litany entwined with newly found strength and hope. We persisted together, a makeshift trinity, dispelling whispers from the spectral abyss, willing to confront our frights to honor the forgotten promise. Eloise responded in kind. The planchette paused for a mere moment before it spun again with involuntary precision, forming the final word. The room stilled into silence. The thrumming energy dissipated, leaving only a ghostly whisper of Eloise's presence. Calm descended upon us, breaking like dawn after a storm. A feeling of release, collective breaths we didn't realize we were holding finally set free. Eloise's soul, long tangled in the web of our past, had dissolved from its tether, leaving behind a profound quietude. Our brash folly unveiled truths, transforming us through fear and friendship, forever intertwined with a spectral memory from our youth. Picking up remnants of the evening, the three of us understood that while the supernatural encounter had ended, the essence of our human fallibility had crafted our fortitude. We might never dabble in the shadows again, but we left with more than we came with. The knowledge that believing, or not, had no bearing on the mysteries lingering just beyond our grasp. Quietly, we concluded our reunion, now bearing the weight of hindsight transformed into wisdom. Each step carried us forward into the illuminating warmth of a midnight breeze, our souls whispering acknowledgement for the abyss we'd braved together. The past, with its dares and promises, evolved into lessons etched within, forever shadowed by the whisper of a forgotten promise that only the bond of friendship could mend. If you've made it this far, the shadows have already begun to close in. Subscribe now to ensure you never miss a terrifying tale. And if you dare, hit the thanks button to buy me a cup of midnight brew. Your support keeps the nightmares flowing. Now, brace yourself for our next story. Echoes of the Damned, Part 1. In the silence that stretched between the old walls of Derek's ancestral house, the air felt pregnant with secrets, whispering in broken fragments that seemed to cling to the shadows. That night, the kind of chill that pressed against your skin even in the warmth of shared laughter carried an ominous edge. The house stood alone at the end of the winding road, every brick steeped in long-abandoned tales, some too terrible to fully recount. We were 5 friends gathered there, an unspoken pact between us born of youthful bravery mixed with the illusion that we could ever understand the mysteries of the world. Derek, our host and the owner of this eerie estate, had suggested it, his charismatic grin never quite reaching the uneasy glint in his eyes. The Ouija board was old, the wood worn smooth from countless hands, yet still alive with potential. We circled it like our ancestors might have once circled a fire, seeking warmth but wary of its dangers. The planchette sat in the center, an artifact of curiosity, apprehension, and daring. "All right," Derek said, breaking the silence that had thickened. His words felt rehearsed, masking something unspoken. "Let's see if there's anyone out there who wants to talk." Marcus, my name, marked me the skeptic of the group. To me, that board was nothing more than vintage entertainment. Yet, a part of me, a part I couldn't ignore, reached for the curious mysteries it offered. Our fingers, each hesitant, settled upon the planchette, eyes locked in silent expectation. As if guided by a will beyond our own, the planchette began to glide smoothly. In the flickering candlelight, we watched, half disbelief and half trepidation. The board spelled out clear as day, echoes. Then it shifted again, urgently now, spelling damned. I laughed, an instinctive bark to mask the creeping dread, though the smile barely clung to my features. Next to me, Emma's expression tightened, her green eyes reflecting the candlelight like emeralds caught in a storm. Even amidst the laughter, a shiver traced its way down my spine, pooling coldly in my gut. "Must be a trick," I murmured, though though my analysis faltered. The game we played was no longer mere diversion. The lines between amusement and horror blurred disturbingly. The hour lurched forward as heavy footsteps. Increasingly, I felt them reverberate across the creaky floorboards. In the echoing silence, I discerned a whisper, a voice elusive yet insistent from every shadowed corner. Perhaps it was a trick of the house or our own anticipation stirring the air, but the board had opened a door and left it ajar, whispering obscure promises of unyielding truths and haunting echoes. As we stumbled out of the drawing room, intending to brush off the unease, the whispers did not relent. They clawed at the back of my consciousness, lingering like mist, demanding attention, hinting at past voices refusing to fade away. What we stirred wasn't simply restless spirits, but shadows of our own making, a pact long forgotten, now rearing its spectral head. Echoes of the damned. Time slipped into twilight's grasp, wrapping the old house in a denser aura of mystery as our uneasy laughter faded. Each of us had tried to forget the strange puzzle the board had laid before us, yet the echoes of those words mirrored in our minds with relentless persistence. Back in the drawing room, discussion flared, spurred on by the strange occurrences of the evening. Emma, who had always nursed a fondness for the supernatural, leaned in with an urgency I couldn't ignore. "These things have happened before," she insisted, the conviction in her voice setting the room alight. "We have to take this seriously." I was ready to counter with skepticism when a sound interrupted, a distant, mournful cry like wind weaving through a broken window or the whisper of something just beyond the wall. We all froze, breaths held, spirits quivering like leaves in the grip of a storm. As if answering Emma's plea, Derek spoke up, his voice subdued yet determined. "Please listen," he urged. "There's something I need to come clean about." He cast a shadowed glance around the room, avoiding our eyes. The weight of his secrets had finally breached the surface. Derek led us into the attic, a place cluttered with relics of the past, memories piled under layers of dust. His face, caught in the dim light, bore lines etched by guilt more profound than time. "I didn't know what it would lead to," he confessed, voice trembling like the hesitant sway of the rafters overhead. "Derek, what did you do?" Emma's voice broke through, echoes of fear underlining her words. "A few years back I made a deal," he began, hesitantly. "Desperate times. I didn't believe it would work, but something did happen, and now..." Before he could say more, the quiet exploded into chaos. The shadows of the house seemed to jump to life, a cacophony of whispers sweeping through us. The pressure was palpable, every word a needle prick at our sanity. Desperate for answers, or at least cessation, we returned to the drawing room. In a frightened yet defiant bid for clarity, we rallied around the board, our touch hesitant and desperate. Beneath our trembling fingertips, the planchette moved again with a purpose marked by finality. The board spelled out the truth, urging our collective dread to the fore. The message was clear, undeniable in its indication that we'd stirred something demanding to be not just heard, but faced. For this night was about the living reckoning with the shadows they cast, faces we had kept hidden, now made undeniable. The planchette then moved once more, with a sudden force that shook us all, to reveal the word faceless. The air around us seemed to shift, morphing with invisible currents that clutched at the breath we drew, leaving our hearts thunderous in our chests and our souls exposed to the spectral cries of old lies. In that moment, the night felt unending, any temporal sense unraveling like the threads of forgotten lives, now whispering their truths. A chill trickled along my spine, a stark reminder that this specter of the faceless truth had only begun to unearth what each of us had long buried. Echoes of the Damned, Part 3. The house, a mutable beast of shadow and silence, had become a stage for the ghosts of our conscience. Under the oppressive ceiling of that old drawing room, each of us had splinters of fear embedded in our being, only sharpened by the revelations unleashed from the board. Silence stretched like a noose, binding us closer to our unveiled secrets until Emma broke the suffocating quiet. "We can't keep running from whatever this is," she said, a quiver of steadfastness in her otherwise trembling tone. Her eyes brimmed with a courage that belied the terror etched across her features. "We need to come together, make this right." Though I harbored a hard gravity of doubt, one only intensified by sheer disbelief, Her words sparked a flicker of resolve within me. Maybe, in facing what we'd unearthed, we could scatter these coerced shadows that clung to us. With a reluctant nod, we resolved to start the seance, determined to confront the echoes head-on. The candles flickered wildly. The shadows cast upon the walls danced like restless specters. Each of us focused our will, our touch on the planchette unanimous. It glided over the board with a determined force, the spirit behind it undeniable yet cryptic in its anguish. The board spelled out reveal, a command rather than a plea, as though the specters had grown weary of our games and now demanded justice. We braced for whatever might be released, dreading yet driven to confront it. The room's atmosphere thickened, every untold story, every suppressed moment condensed into the tensions of these cramped quarters, ready to burst. And then, as if granting us a sick grace, the planchette spelled, "Look within." It was a call to action, as much as an accusation. We understood then, in the silence beneath the howling of unseen winds through the house, that the haunting was not just of ghosts external, but those birthed from our own transgressions. In a moment of collective insight, we began to see the roots of our predicament, not in the supernatural, but in us. Derek for his pacts and insincere devotions, myself for skepticism denying any need for reconciliation, and Emma, living in partial truths rather than complete acceptance. The echoes spoke of what was reflected in our souls, not merely the house's halls. With newfound clarity, we pledged to seek redemption. There was no ceremony or ritual to complete this, but only the daunting task of rectifying the aspects of ourselves that had called these echoes to life. Our grip faltered from the planchette to meet one another's eyes, strengthened by the shared understanding that some emancipation from these cursed whispers began here and now. Although this seance hadn't cleansed us entirely from the ominous presence, a step toward atonement had taken root, a seed recognizing that the real haunting lies in the choices we make and continue to live with. The following morning's first light filtered through the old ramshackle windows, basking the house with a gentle warmth that seemed to almost apologize for the chill before it. Even though we knew the echoes would remain, the possibility of liberation lay not in battling them, but in overcoming the faceless fears, silencing whispers of the past by confronting them within ourselves. Part 1. Echoes of the Forgotten Pact. The old house seemed to groan in sync with the storm outside. Each gust of wind rattling the attic window felt like the steady rhythm of a heart on the edge of despair. As my eyes adjusted to the flickering candlelight, I caught a glimpse of its presence, a dusty Ouija board tucked in the shadowed corner of our forgotten attic. Maybe it was destiny or just the whisper of the storm, but that night, curiosity got the better of us. It was Liam's idea to gather around the dilapidated board. His enthusiasm was infectious. Emily hesitated, her fingers lightly touching the planchette, a shadow of apprehension crossing her face. But the allure of the supernatural story we were about to weave was irresistible. "We're not afraid, are we?" Liam's voice pierced the room's chill, bringing with it a sense of daring. His charisma often pushed us beyond the boundaries of the ordinary, and that evening was no exception. The anticipation sparked a buzz under my skin, clouded by the aroma of melting wax and musty wood. As we placed our fingers atop the planchette, the wind intensified, sweeping whispers through the creaking rafters like a haunting melody. Our laughter dimmed as expectant silence blanketed the room. The board soon came to life, trembling at first, then confidently gliding beneath our fingertips. The planchette steadily moved to spell, "I am here." A nervous chuckle escaped Liam while Emily's eyes darted to mine, reflecting the unease we all silently shared. The chill deepened, instilling a silent pact among us, a surrender to the mysterious forces we barely understood. The intrigue of that night marked the beginning of our descent. Days passed, but the experience lingered like an invisible tether, pulling me back to that moment. Each time I climbed those creaking stairs, the memories clawed at my thoughts, urging me to understand the entity's cryptic welcome. Determined, I started diving into the history of our bizarrely charming house. In the dark hallway, shadows swayed independent of the storm's rhythm. The Ouija session seemed to have opened a doorway, and the house buzzed with a faint vibrancy, barely detectable but unmistakably there. Once robust conversations whispered instead from behind doors, the source unknown, the language foreign, intended solely for the attuned ear. Despite my attempts to dismiss them as remnants of my imagination, I couldn't escape the sense that we were never alone. Late one night, I stood in that dim corridor as the shadows played with the edges of my vision. The hairs on my arms stood on end, not from the cold but from an indescribable presence. Behind you, a softly unrecognizable voice whispered, breathless yet tumultuous, carried with the breeze. Heart racing, I spun around, finding nothing but a fog of fear beginning to cloud my once clear skepticism. The distance growing between us was almost tangible. Our once unwavering friendship stood on the knife edge of doubt. In the flickering shadows of reality and the unknown, paranoia flourished. Every unexplained noise, every flicker of light became a reminder of what we had summoned. Arguments erupted as easily as the storm clouds outside, leaving chasms where trust once lay strong. "If you keep feeding into it, you're just inviting it back," Emily accused one evening, her voice trembling with resentment and fear, an emotion foreign to her usual calm demeanor. Liam, ever defiant, spat back, "It's just a damn board, Em. You're letting it get into your head." As their quarrel pierced the silence, my heart ached with the weight of reality crushing down upon us. Each accusatory word only invited more shadows into the room, distorting the borders of what was tangible. I clung to a fading hope that understanding might offer salvation, pressing on through the sands of time in search of answers. In the dim solitude of night, I buried myself in research, unraveling the tangled history that shrouded our mysterious Ouija board. Curling over faded pages by candlelight, my eyes caught symbols akin to first what appeared on the board during our spectral communion. With a sinking heart, I uncovered what it meant. A pact bound us to a presence from beyond, locked in by ancient script. I sought Emily's insight. Her intuition often hinted at hidden truths. Her delicate fingers glided over sketches in her studio, depicting twisted forms and shadowy visages reflecting visions withheld even from my imagination. Her brushstrokes had steadily transcended mere art, mapping a transition from our world to theirs. "This was in my dream," Emily whispered, examining a painting. Her voice barely masked the terror of having seen what she recreated, a threshold bridging our safety and their shadowy domain. "What does it say to you?" I probed, moved by the fragmented revelations splattered across her canvas. Emily's trembling hand reached for another incomplete portrait, depicting a doorway made of flame, inscribed with the fateful symbols. "It spells out return or suffer," she said, a whisper now full of gravity. Her art had provided us clues, fragments of the entity's voice whispered through each brushstroke. We were bound not only by our actions, but also by the cryptic message woven through Emily's subconscious visions. A path maybe of liberation, maybe of doom, yet to be carved by our resolve. With newfound clarity, I faced the growing storm outside, grappling with shadows cast by the truths we hesitated to accept. The crescendo of fear and uncertainty drove us back to the Ouija board, now a crucible upon which fate would engrave its decree. With Emily and Liam at my side, we gathered once more in the dimly lit room, desperation painted on our faces as the storm outside waged war against the night. The air felt heavy with anticipation as we placed our fingers on the planchette. Emily's subtle nod steadied my nerves, reaffirming our silent vow to end this once and for all. The flickering shadows twisted violently as the planchette surged with newfound vigor. Liam, always the bravest, demanded answers. "What do you want from us?" he challenged, voice steady within the maelstrom. The board's message chilled us to the core as we read, "A debt unsatisfied." Realization pooled between us like icy water, a toll left unpaid, a balance to strike within our unsuspecting lives. The distant storm roared its approval, lightning casting brief glimpses of the otherworldly intruder called forth. Serenity reluctantly entwined with purpose as Liam stood resolute, his intention more powerful than words. "It's me it wants," he whispered, revelation softening his steely gaze. "Liam, no." Emily's protest welled with emotion, but her voice faltered under the weight of his chosen path. He shook his head, determination firm yet gentle in his eyes. "It's the only way, Em, you know it." We watched as the planchette continued its restless dance, acknowledging him alone. Last right. In heart-wrenching silence, Liam accepted his fate, sealing the pack's demands like a guardian centurion, a keeper securing the passage for those he vowed to protect. A flash of lightning blinded us, the subsequent thunder nearly tearing the fabric of reality as a solemn peace enveloped the room. When the world stilled, we were left with silence, both haunting and serene. Liam was gone, claimed by the shadows that sought their due, but leaving behind an indelible spirit binding our friendship's strength. Emily and I stood embracing the dawn's gentle glow as it pierced the remaining storm's fragility. With hopeful trepidation, we stepped away from the house, leaving behind echoes of what had been invoked in heedless misadventure. The world resumed its rhythm, though forever altered by the choices we had made and by Liam's sacrifice, a secret held close by shadows and whispered promises.
Whispers in the Dark, Part 1. Long before we dared to unearth the whispering shadows of the past, we believed the dead had no voice in the world of the living. We were wrong. The evening I found the Ouija board, the sun hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows that crept across my attic floor. I was simply searching for an old photo album when my fingers brushed the dust-covered box, forgotten amongst relics of childhood memories. Curiosity tugged at me more than nostalgia. It was the kind of curiosity that tickles the back of your mind, whispering promises of adventure mixed with a thrill of danger. Later that night, the board lay between us on the living room carpet, candles flickering erratically as if breathing with anticipation. Luke and Katie were sprawled across from me, their faces half hidden in enigmatic light and shadow. We'd planned for a night of horror movies, but the pile of unsorted DVDs now seemed dull in comparison to the mystery lying before us. "Let's give it a try," Katie suggested, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Luke chuckled nervously, masking his intrigue with a facade of disbelief. We placed our fingers on the planchette, drawn together not just by friendship, but by an insatiable urge to uncover the unknown. "So who wants to start?" I ventured, my voice barely a whisper above the crackle of the candles. With a shared glance, we silently agreed. "Is there anyone here with us?" I asked, the air in the room feeling dense, weighted by our collective breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Just as skepticism began to creep back, the planchette twitched, then glided across the board with a will of its own. The board spelled out, "I am here." Our laughter faltered, replaced by a tense, palpable silence. We had crossed a threshold into the uncanny. Luke, trying to ease the tension, asked, "Who are we speaking to?" Yet beneath his cool demeanor, I sensed a crack. The planchette moved steadily, spelling, "Friend from the past." Chills crept up my spine as I realized we were no longer in control. A new presence seemed to hover just beyond the shadows. We exchanged nervous glances, questioning silently whether to continue or to pull back from the precipice. Emboldened by curiosity, Katie pressed on. "What do you want to tell us?" The board's reply was hauntingly straightforward, a warning. The room seemed colder. The shadows under the candlelight elongated, as if reaching towards us with unseen hands. We sat frozen, hearts pounding in unison with the unexplained rhythm of fate. Whispers in the Dark, Part 2. My heart drummed loudly in the quiet room, each beat echoing our fear of venturing too far into the unknown. The meaning behind the message was blurry, yet it stirred something primal, a need to know and an urge to flee. Luke's bravado faltered, and I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes, a childlike fear hidden beneath layers of skepticism. "Whose warning?" he asked, attempting to mask the tremor in his voice. The planchette moved effortlessly, as if carried by unseen fingers. The board spelled out, "Her." Instinctively, I withdrew my hand, but curiosity anchored it back alongside my friend's. "Her?" Katie repeated, her voice tight, straining against the monumental quiet pressing us on all sides. "She is near," the board responded. Chilled fingers seemed to grip my very soul. My mind raced, searching for reason amongst the madness. Who was this mysterious her? The room's atmosphere became dense, heavy with dread and unspoken secrets. "Why warn us?" I asked, my question breaking the stifling silence. It was as if the shadows widened their gaze, focused solely on the fragile flicker of our shared defiance. The planchette glided, spelling the words that plunged a knife of fear deep within. Trust, loyalty. Katie looked at me, her smile tense, edged with doubt. Had the game affected her, or was I simply projecting my unease onto her familiar face? Emboldened by the sense of impending revelation, I was about to inquire further when the board bat disrupted my thoughts with a shocking declaration. Betrayal is close. My breath hitched, a mounting dread coiling within like a serpent. Every second stretched into eternity as we absorbed what the board unveiled, a fragment of something dark lurking beneath the surface of our camaraderie. Our eyes met in silent communion, the cruel dark between us filled with whispered uncertainties. Though the board lay still, its grim pronouncement expanded, rippling through the fabric of our reality, knitting a tapestry of unseen darkness that bound us by fate to whatever haunted its origins. Here, in the trembling light, our tether to the normal world grew dangerously thin. The dance of shadows encroached as we continued in defiance of the falling night, both drawn and repelled by the haunting specter of whispered secrets yet to come. Whispers in the dark. A heavy silence enveloped us, punctuated only by the soft crackling of candle flames. The secrets of the shadowed world pressed against us, demanding to be unveiled. Struggling against the insidious grip of fear tightening around us, we clung to the fragile remnants of courage. We need to end this, Luke's voice wavered, an undercurrent of desperation breaking the steady facade he once wore so well. But the Ouija board defied our intentions. Its sentience seemed palpable, driven by an agenda we couldn't fathom. The planchette shifted boldly, its movement commanding our attention. One of you is not safe. A palpable panic gripped us. Katie glanced frantically around the room, her eyes brimming with gut-wrenching fear. Why won't it stop? We need to break the connection. Her voice was barely audible over the rapid drum of my heart. In a frenzied rush, we quickly blew out the candles, hoping the darkness would reclaim whatever held sway over the board. Yet the planchette remained poised, unmoved by the extinguishing flames, the board illuminated solely by the encroaching dusk's ever-watchful gaze. Desperation overtook rationality. I raked my hands through my hair, my mind a swirl of confusion and denial. My focus drifted, and the shadows seemed to dance with grotesque intent, spinning a web woven with echoes of past fears and broken trusts. With trembling hands, I turned back to the Ouija board, my whisper no more than a thin thread of defiance. What do you want from us? The board spelled its final, chilling message. All forgotten agreements must be paid. Our invisible chain snapped taut, lashing us into a forced communal understanding, some agreement forgotten, a pact unknowingly broken. Beyond the flickering shadows, reality seemed to warp, split into fragments, haunted by spectral voices that lingered with malice. In those final moments, the weight of regret settled heavily between us as the shadows began their retreat. Alone in the shadowed silence, I grappled with the echoing remnants of the nocturnal encounter, a solitary figure adrift in the rift between what was and what lingered beyond. The truth bore deep into my heart. Though the candles were out and the heavens untouched, the whispers remained, an eternal reminder of a world unseen. And in their haunting embrace, I understood that the shadows had claimed something far beyond the ken of ordinary men, a piece of my soul, eternally bound to the whisperings of the dark. Part 1. It was supposed to be a night of innocent curiosity, a bid to dispel childhood tales that haunted the dusty corners of our lives. The rain had begun pattering insistently against the attic window, rhythmic yet carrying an air of foreboding that felt unsettlingly fitting. The house, my family's old estate, loomed around us, shadowed and filled with whispers of its former glory. We sat in a circle on the unearthed attic floor, clutching flashlights that flickered reluctantly under the weight of the clouded night. There was Martin, ever the realist with his calculated gaze, and Jenna, whose wide eyes reflected a mixture of intrigue and unease. Between us lay the Ouija board, an heirloom passed down generations, adorned with curlicues and symbols that danced when caught in the light. "This is it, Sarah," Martin taunted playfully. "Are we sure we're going to find ghosts here, or just more dust?" I feigned confidence, though a shiver gnawed at my spine. Let's see if my grandma has anything to say about it. Maybe she stored more than memories in this attic. With tentative fingers, we rested our hands upon the planchette. The attic stirred with a quiet tension as we focused, a silence broken only by our own breath. The planchette trembled, then slid across the board with deliberate purpose. We exchanged nervous glances, but remained silent. Margaret's presence felt more than seen, like an echo reverberating far beyond the attic. The board spelled out the words, "Remember me." Laughter cracked around us, a thin veneer over an unspoken thrill, a veil to the recognition of a presence now felt and not to be mocked. "Coincidence?" asked Jenna, her voice threaded with an edge of glad disbelief. But something shifted. The air grew dense, and we watched as the planchette moved again, now slower but with apparent clarity. The message that formed stripped away the levity once more. Secrets bind us. A shiver ran down my spine, dread unfurling its cold embrace as the weight of those letters settled in the room. Was I uncovering playful whispers from beyond, or was this something more sinister, more personal? The answer remained caught just beyond the attic's shadowed threshold, waiting for us to step through. Somewhere beneath the aged beams and floorboards, history stirred awake. As stories go, dips into the unknown are often quick to follow the allure of unseeable truths. We decided to reconvene downstairs, insinuating tea and talk might alleviate the growing tension. Yet even as we crossed the threshold, I couldn't help but feel that the darkness we left behind was watching, waiting. As the echoes of our laughter faded, the Ouija board loomed silent, poised, as if it knew secrets too vast for simple games. And just like that, a truth was told. This wasn't a story to be feared from the outside, but from within. Minutes into tea, the tension softened only briefly. Conversation turned, and curiosity built anew. It was Jenna who spoke first as a peal of thunder rolled away into the night sky. I think maybe there's more to know," she said, unease wrapped in her words. Martin shrugged off his hesitations, clearer now from the warmth and familiarity that surrounded us. It's up to us whether that want or fear becomes our truth. The challenge hung in the air, tantalizing and bittersweet, crowned by the shadows left scuttling in unseen halls. As the clock whispered late into the night, we found ourselves again before the Ouija's challenge, with questions unslept, between echoes and entities. Little did we know, our pursuit for understanding meant following deeper into the shadows than any light should dare chase. Part 2, The Descent. The night deepened, and curiosity lured us to the library, an archive of stories stored in dust-heavy tomes and family portraits whose eyes held both watchfulness and warning. We'd hoped these artifacts might shed light on the cryptic messages. Every creak beneath our feet felt like a whisper challenging the quiet to deepen further. "I brought the journals over, there," I gestured, leading Martin and Jenna toward a grand shelf stacked with my family's past. It loomed like a treasure trove, overwhelming in its duty of guarding generations of whispers. As midnight laid its claim, we rifled through pages brittle with age. I felt the weight of legacy in my hands, the inescapable inheritance of stories past. And there within the pages, between faded scripts and weathered ink, a family journal unveiled its darker narrative. The words intertwined curses and cunning, dealings with restless entities for prosperity, traded at the cost of a pact, the unseen pact. Suddenly, fear was no longer an abstract concept tucked safely away with childhood nightmares. It threaded into the fabric of our evening, pulling tighter with each revelation. To say we felt the hair rise on our necks was to mark only its surface. "It can't be true, can it?" Martin murmured, fingers trembling over the withered script, voice barely more than a ripple of distrust in what he read. "We must have summoned something more than memories," Jenna whispered, echoing our silent dread as the implications settled. Later, I lay in darkness, sleep driven away by shadows whispering through the mind. Memories morphed into dreams, a procession of vivid skies and cold winds. Sounds of laughter melted into cries blurred at the edges of the unknown. My grandmother's face faded into an unfamiliar presence, bearing no kingship to comfort. When I awoke, the room was saturated with an unsettling calm, like the moment after the storm breaks. My heartbeat thudded in the silence, each echo vibrating with barely cloaked revelation and warning. Morning broke as a reluctant intruder. As I sat up in the weak light spilling through the curtains, I saw them, 3 words etched faintly on the mirror, their presence wounding with unholy diligence. Find the truth. I stared at my own reflection, eyes wide with the realization of sanctuary stripped away. Martin arrived first, bringing coffee and a semblance of solace. I couldn't shake that feeling, he said, of something reaching out. As the escalation crept closer, small omens began to take root. Together we stood in the upstairs hallway, where the floorboards groaned in protest at the secrets we unraveled. A hush fell with the coming terror. It was a subtle, creeping fear that embraced rather than jolted. Martin stood watching with growing alarm as faint marks, scratches, etched themselves on his skin. Each seemed more deliberate, more forceful, like an invisible pen dancing to its own sinister rhythm. What's happening to me? His voice cracked with unguarded panic, riddling it through our shared silence. Jenna moved forward, trying to soothe him, brushing invisible specters from the air with her steady hands. It's them, those spirits, the curse. We stumbled to our resolve. As friends did, we enveloped fear in our circle, using our bond as a fragile bulwark against the looming shadows. The darkness needs reasoning, I declared, defiant yet burdened. Perhaps knowing the truth will set us free. 3 lamps, 4 walls, yet our peace had faltered. Onward we went, desiring to draw light to the forgotten tale thrumming through our blood. It was not yet optimism that led us, but defiance, cracking open the vessel of deeply rooted bonds. Perhaps hope resided where horror feared to tread. And perhaps, in the unraveling of those ink-page secrets and cursed things left unsaid, lay the salvation we sought, or perhaps the very curse intended otherwise. Part 3. The Reckoning. The storm came rolling over the horizon as if summoned by the very curse entwining our lives. Wind screamed around the house, an orchestra of ghosts pleading their origin stories against the windows. Darkness encased the estate in a shrouded persistence, every flicker of lightning momentary, illuminating legacy and laughter long ceased. Gathered once more in the heart of the house, we were ready, or as ready as desperation might prepare us. Candles flickered on their precarious perches, their meager flames challenging shadows to retreat. The ancient grimoire lay open, pages distilled with time, words tinged in ritual belonging to both prayers and curses. With determination chilling resolve, I began to chant words from the grimoire. The air thickened, and we watched, a collective breath held against the unseen tide. The board before us trembled on its own accord. The planchette moved to spell, "Free the truth." A presence rallied above and around, promising fear and finality, trailing shimmering threads that whispered promises of forgotten pacts and unholy links. Yet, deep within the cacophony, clarity arrived, a way to rise above its undefeated yoke. A moment's agony bore witness to things unbound. The planchette's movement became frantic, revealing one last unforgiving message: never break. Each word clawed against hope, tethered by fraying edges, a sickening lurch of fear expanding in the gloom. With a final whispered plea to the shadows, a tempest swept through unseen, and the entity, cloaked in my grandmother's visage, appeared amid the flickering darkness, standing as a sentinel of injustice masked in maternal form. The silence cracked. My heart rebelled against its rampant measures. "No," I cried out, lifting my voice above the storm. "I reject this pact. It shall not bind me, nor those to follow." The presence convulsed, its form contorted, fading into whispered echoes as my words met the defenses wrought by blood, stones, and seals emblazoned far before my time. In that moment of tension, the air shattered and light streamed, chasing shadows from corners to the yawning void beyond. Jenna and Martin rushed forward, arms linking with mine, as together we faced the space now empty. And in that emptiness, the truth lingered, a bond unsettled but unbroken, an offering unaccepted. Our breath reclaimed as firelight faded, soothing the room once ensconced in its ancestral chain. Voyage into night renewed a tint of fire within our bones, but silence prevailed in no truer harmony than knowing bound truths lay dormant for now. The morning's light, with diffused serenity, stained the horizon, found us broken yet bound by new certainties, hands clasped and steps synchronized in truths understood. We constructed truths from nightmares, gentle paths lain over old earth, leaving shadows where spirits balked. Yet even as we stood together at dawn, the chill of understanding remained. a reminder etched in time's imprint, whispered from astral echoes daring forever. Our legacy altered paths, and entropy enfolded what nightmares held true. As we climbed toward daylight, hope washed us in renewed courage. We were not free, not entirely. Each heartbeat could resurrect those haunted words. But we were balanced, in the ever-watchful gaze that said threats unspoken still ripen beneath peace's mantle. At the cornerstone of closure within its heart, the estate stood proud, awaiting tales yet unsung. For here, none would gather dust too long. None would remain unchanged by whispers the board spoke. Our silence, a new pact waiting to be remembered. And etched in fire's wake between breaths, another truth bided its time. Dream safe.